But in the end, he didn't have any choice because I just insisted. And after a while, he started to email me. He doesn't hear, he has a cochlear implant, so he doesn't talk on the phone very easily. But we exchanged more than 100 emails, and I went down to see him a couple times and more. And he also opened up his family and his circle of friends, and even his psychologist, talked to me. So ultimately, I spent quite a lot of time either thinking about or writing about him.
Now, Zev, he's not known for giving a lot of interviews outside of controlled situations. I mean, you'll see him on Fox, and really not a lot of other places because, George Bush was the same way. He wouldn't go anywhere that he might possibly be ambushed or asked a difficult question. How did you get in the door with Rush to begin with?
I don't know. I asked to go and see him, and I think he did some research about me, and which I later found out from one of the people on his staff. And I guess that they just decided that maybe it would be worth talking to me. I don't know. There's nothing particularly charming about me other than that. He didn't do it for my good looks, I assure you. So it probably had to do with his. He once told me that he had an instinct that I would be fair with him, and which I hope I have been. I mean, I tried to.
Did you have to once you got past the magazine piece for the Times and started working on the book to get his continued cooperation? Did you have to offer anything in exchange? Did you have to give him any guarantees you wouldn't touch on certain things?
Nothing.
Okay.
He asked me, is this authorized? And I said, no, it's not authorized. And he said, well, why should I do it then? And I said, because I'm going to do it anyway. And he said, do I get any money out of it? And I said, you're already too rich for, you don't need money. I need money. Mm-hmm. So that was it. And I wrote what I wrote. I never showed him anything. When the book was already finished and bound and, done, I sent him a copy of it. And I didn't hear for a couple, 3 weeks, and then he said that he said on the air that he hadn't read it. He liked it because people who had read it liked it, but he said he wasn't going to read it. And I wrote him a note, and I said, come on, what kind of thing is that? Read it, see what you think. And just yesterday, he, at his last broadcast before he went off on his honeymoon, he said that he had read the book, and he actually likes it a lot. So I'm glad he likes it, and there it is.
Well, and I can tell our listeners that not only did he like it, but there's a note on the front and center on RushLimbaugh.com that says he liked it. He was surprised that he liked it, and that he thought it was very fair, and he never thought he would say that. So, But I have to ask you, as a guy who's written for the New York Daily News, written more recently for the New York Times Magazine, do you think that's a drawback for you going forward as a journalist, that you did this book on Limbaugh and he liked it? Would that cause you any problems with editors in the future?
Look at me. I've written I'm 62, going on 63 years old. And most of my life I've written what I felt like writing and said what I felt like saying, and very often it was not particularly popular with editors and so on. Sometimes it was. I don't want to say that I'm completely indifferent, but at this stage of the game, I'm an old Jew. I'm not about to start worrying about what editors think at this point.
What about what old Jews think? Just since you phrased it that way, I mean, he's. I mentioned in my introduction that. A lot of people think a lot of things about Rush. A lot of times people who haven't listened to him have a very pointed opinion of him. Nonetheless, sometimes I think that without having listened to him, you can't really put him in context. But a lot of Jewish people are not very fond of him and his approach.
Yeah, I know, including just about everybody in my family and everybody all my friends. Look, I think Jews are great. I'm an Israeli Jew as well as just a plain old Jew. I spent most of my life in Israel. I don't think Jews are very smart about politics, most of them, and I don't think that they have any idea what they're talking about when they talk about Limbaugh, because none of them listen to Limbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that, in general, people that have strong opinions about things they know nothing about add much to the conversation or impress me much in terms of their, insights. It's easy to be against Rush Limbaugh. It's like, it's like people on the right who are against Jews. I mean, it's not on the right. I mean, on the far right, the Ku Klux, or on the left, by the way, on the, on the anti-Israel left.
Right.
Everybody's everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I don't think that a majority of Jews in the United States voted for Jimmy Carter too. I don't think Jews are always extremely intelligent in their assessment of where their interests lie.
Now, some of the critics that I've read complained that your book didn't break a lot of new ground, but I kind of thought that was besides the point. I haven't read I didn't read his Rush's own two books, and I just thought that you managed to put kind of a human face on a radio personality who is kind of more caricature than flesh to even many of his supporters.
Well, I mean, first of all, it broke new ground for people that don't know much about Rush or who don't listen to him, which is, a lot of people. The one review that I'm aware of that said, well, actually, I think there were two. One was in the Washington Post, and it was sort of dismissive, but it was written by David Frum, who is one of Limbaugh's great enemies in the Republican Party, and who actually wrote a Newsweek cover story last year about how Rush Limbaugh was toxic for the Republican Party. And that review, I'm sure that David Frum didn't learn much from the book because he's an expert on Limbaugh. On the other hand, the Washington Post ombudsman apologized to the Post readers for having assigned the book to Frum, which was, sort of wildly inappropriate, especially since I wrote about David in the book, and he didn't mention that in the review. So that was one. The other was written by Janet Maslin, who I thought wrote a fantastic review as far as selling books was concerned for me, because it was so nasty. But what I liked about it especially was she, after saying that it was a terrible book, she also complained that it's too short. Which was like, the woman who complains to the waiter that the food is bad and the portions are small.
Mm-hmm.
So there it is. Other than those two, a lot of people have said negative things about the book, and they're very welcome to do that. But nobody else has said that there isn't enough new stuff in there. Some people have said that there's too much. And I guess, like any book, there are different levels of information, as I said, among readers. I'm not apt, for example, to find almost any book about Israeli politics very enlightening because I've spent a good part of my life in Israeli politics, but that doesn't mean that people who aren't experts in it wouldn't find many books on Israeli politics on all sides of the issues quite interesting.